and doing his thing. Alive. We're live.
Cold in here?
She was. Well, I've turned up the key. I've turned up the air conditioning a little bit, so you may start sweating.
No, he's not too bad. He's always cold.
Is he always cold? Oh my gosh, that stuff that way. I mean, that's what we're going. They just have to look in on our mess and what we're trying to deal with. Let's do that. Let's take care of sharing the needs of our family and. Huh? Okay, my wife would like for you to know who we are. This is Safe Harbor Fellowship, and this is our Wednesday night Bible study and a time of prayer, of remembering those that we love and we're concerned about, and gathering those needs. Pat is on schedule for Monday for surgery for right knee replacement. She's got a couple more doctor's visits, but all the doctor's visits so far have just been hunky-dory and things are right on, so we are on the way, and we're just so grateful that that's happening. And former daughter-in-law is coming down Saturday and will be with you for a week. So we'll get you through that. And then there are those of us who can always pick up a Whataburger or something, get it over to you if you're just starving. So we're going to be doing well with that. Other needs that we have, we continue to remember Marilyn Milam, though I talked to her because the Cowboys won. I don't talk to people if the Cowboys lose, but they won, so we had some a brief conversation. I can't remember what it was that kept her from church Sunday, but she seems to be doing very well given what she has been through. Ida and James and the family are up in San Antonio today. They are doing I think a CT scan, but also visiting with the radiologist whenever they begin the radiation treatment. She's getting that sort of in the hopper, though she has a chemo treatment next week, so they are to continue to drive back and forth, and they seem to be doing well. They missed church Sunday because the 3 grandkids from Houston were down, and I told them, I said, they don't get to come down again unless they come by church, so you don't get to skip church if they're down. You bring them here with them because we haven't seen those girls in a long, long time, and I bet they have grown. My goodness, I would love to see them, and so but we do pray for Ida and James and Dora Silva, her sister, her older sister, who's really marginal but at home and being cared for. Linda Anderson seemed to be much more hopeful and anticipating some good new kinds of adventures and some sort of new research and new promising treatments for cancer. And yeah. Well, she was down visiting her. Her sister was down here with Randy, the nephew that had the liver transplant from her son. They were here, but now she's gone back up to Abilene or wherever they're from and to do that. So that way.
I don't think she's looking for adventures. I think she's looking to canned tomatoes.
Well, that is an adventure for Linda. I know. She really wants a quality of life back. She does. And it seems like that's one of the things they're talking to her about will not be as invasive but has some really good potential. So for Linda, we continue to do that. Had a conversation with Patricia Smith about 30 minutes ago, and she went to the physical therapist today, and she's hurting like crazy, but still very hopeful. She maybe was over self-medicating, so she had some moments that were uncomfortable for her, but she was doing well now, and I'm just grateful for that and promise that we'll be praying for her as well as Rosie. Rosie's lost a lot of weight, and she is, I think there's some onset of dementia happening, and so there's a lot of grieving that is there, but also just Rosie's still at home, and so they have that kind of connection that I think that blesses them in some very special way. So. Yeah, Michelle, and yeah, she's. But they depend on, to some extent, on her to be able to get her here. So they don't have the wheels or anything else. So that's something that they have to do that way.
Step on her.
I think she's doing some physical therapy, Mike. So I think so. I think they're probably doing that. When she was talking to me, she was already in bed and enjoying that. So evidently she had been up, and yeah, I think that's part of her physical therapy is getting her on her feet because she talks about it being very painful. And that's, but again, she's progressing, some days better than others. So we're very hopeful for that. Told her we're missing her voice. And They were practicing today getting in and out of the front seat of the van. Now, I don't know what that entails, but anyway, that's a prospect of being able to drive or to get around or something. So hopefully that way. Yeah, delicate little steps. Mary Jo is back on treatment. She is taking a reduced level of the chemo, but just doing, very, very hopefully accepting that this is probably what she needs to do to sustain life and to have some quality down the road. So we are very much encouraged, and yet something like that. Okay, so she is caring for herself, but she's a long ways from here, so I don't have anybody to complain and tell me how bad I'm doing. So we get it vicariously from Mary Jo, because she's my corrector at every turn. That's something like that. Yeah, she is threatening to come back if I don't straighten up. So that's just, I'm working like crazy to get it straightened up, so we don't have to do that. Yeah, that's right. I hope so. It'll be face to face, so she can tell me where I'm really messing up. George is and they're planning on their trip up to New Jersey, the 4th of July, the Thursday before. 4th of November, 4th of July. Well, it's the 4th, okay, but it sure is. That sounds good to me. But it's the Thursday before daylight savings time comes to an end, so on the 7th. So, but George is ready to go, and they're really looking forward to that. Jackie Allen, did you see her at the senior center or anything, Joanne?
No, she's not coming to the center. I asked Kurt how she was doing. I think he mentioned Sunday that she had eaten some.
He brought home some barbecue, and she had to have it, and it just absolutely tore her. Made her sick, and so she missed church Sunday. But
he said that the doctor has told her that she needs to stick with soups and things.
Soup, keep it very, till she's healed from the hiatal hernia and lifting everything back into its place. So for Jackie and for Kurt, we pray. For Guy Thornton, who had a good test results from some polyps that were his, he was very grateful and just continue to pray for him. Brandy Nelson, Quinn's friend.
MD Anderson, either yesterday or today, I'm not sure.
Okay, but she went to consult about any potential help, healing. Brandy Nelson, cancer. There is return. She had it some time ago, but it's come back. It's in her brain, and her lungs, and it's just that doesn't look very well. But we do pray for her so much. Isaiah, functioning and thinking. That's wonderful. It is. Isaiah Mead, our young man who lost his grandfather. The funeral will be. I think it's just going to be a gravesite at Veterans Memorial. He was an old military person. And it's the 28th, which is next week on Thursday. So, but Isaiah met with him Monday on our regular schedule, and he was doing okay. Harold Shockley, Sandra Pratt, neighbors of ours, and Tony, our next door neighbor, continues to deal with their issues. Sandra is doing chemo, but would seem to be doing well with that.
I have not seen her come out with the dogs the last
Okay.
days. So.
She may have some setback with that. Mike got a new kind of little program
Yes, sir.
just a couple hours ago, and it's beeping.
I was just telling Vicki about it. I looked down there and it wasn't even working.
Oh, well, it's working now.
Now it's working, yeah.
Okay, you had to punch it, yeah.
This is the same type stimulator, but it has 3 different programs in it than the last one I had.
Okay,
And it's more powerful.
okay.
And she gave a lot of rigmarole about,
What it can do and this sort of thing. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So a new system, Mike. That is great, but it just, you don't know. Right now, it still hurts like crazy,
Hurts a lot.
and I just wish it were stopping. But it never kept you from going to Aransas or to Ingleside to eat Sunday lunch, did it?
Nothing stops me from eating, does it?
I don't know, Mike. It's hard for me to see how much you've gained when I'm looking at how much I've gained. So.
I'm telling you, I got on that scale. The doctor said, "How much do you weigh? How tall are you?"
Hard to- just as I'm as tall as I am wide. Okay, I mean I am well proportioned. Okay, let's not do any worse with that. Mike, praying for you and your brother. You're both of your brothers, but so good to see you. You just make my day. We think about Mimi and her son, who's supposed to be here the 31st on that Sunday, and he's promised he wants to be here. He wants to meet the people that have been praying for him. And I thought Mimi might be here tonight, but I know that they're going on vacation to Conroe, to Lake Conroe, and she was looking forward to that. So that's this weekend, and so she'll be back the next week, and we'll be here that Sunday. But we do thank God for what He's doing in their life. Chris Wani was, as we shared with you Sunday, was out of intensive care, was in a regular room, was able to increasingly navigate without all the. He's on some oxygen, support, but nothing like he was before. And so this is my dear Indian Christian brother that sat at the table with me in a Kairos back. I guess maybe Leonard was the rector for that Kairos, it seems like. Yeah, it was. Yeah, because he's been out 5 or 6 years now. And Chris was just one of those, you just meet people in all walks of life, but they're in prison. They're men that you meet that just really, they have something happens, and you remember them, and it is really neat that we can pray for Chris, and we have Krista, Hominick, Krista Burke, Hominick Burke, but whatever. But she has a friend, Jerry Hulse, who died, and this is a friend of hers, and she was concerned about that. And then Judy got a voicemail from Betty Perry. And she's asking for prayers for her daughter and son-in-law. The son-in-law's got cancer, has been fainting, and the daughter-in-law's got some polyps or some cysts that have to be addressed and surgically removed. And that means that Betty is not being able to move to her own place, and that's of concern for her. So we do really want to remember Betty, and she called her church family and asked for prayers, and I think that is so tender. I just love that. Pray for Owen. No, don't worry about Gary. He rolls with the punches.
It looks okay to me.
He does. It just marginalized Mike. It doesn't, but he just wishes his dad just could be so much more available to his support. But his dad's going to be his dad, and thank God for that. But his Owen is Owen, so it just has to be that way. But Gary, God has blessed him enough that he is able to walk away from his Houston assignment and be present to a dad in the last years of his life. But Owen continues to just be Owen and be alert, and just an incredible kind of witness to that man's vitality and health. And it's just shoes on the other foot now. Instead of Gary driving Owen mad, it's in the age of life that Owen's driving Gary mad. So turnabout's fair play. So it just works out. It just works out beautifully that way. We've been thinking about Joanne's former sister-in-law and her son continue to do well. Okay. And she's good. Yeah, which is good, because normally she would tell you that. And then Joanne, if she looks a little giddy, she's either headed for Paris or Las Vegas or Dallas. I can't remember which one it is to visit with her family. So it is the next week. Okay. So Euless, really. Hurst. Yeah.
Susan will take me up to Beeville, and then my grandson and his wife.
You'll drive with them to Dallas. And then she'll stay over with her daughter and son-in-law in Hurst or Euless or Bedford. Hurst, okay. They're bedroom communities of Fort Worth, but so she'll spend a few days there, and then they get back Saturday. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So next Wednesday, Joanne won't be here, and Judy will not be here. She's going to go up and visit with her family. Our son had a episode with his his heart, but it dawned on him he had forgotten to take his meds. So that's not good. And I was hoping to see Polly tonight, because Rhonda also changed her meds for her heart arrhythmia, and it seemed to be working, but I just haven't heard. And not seeing her, I was a little concerned, wondering if everything's okay. But
A little more about Judy's son.
he's doing okay. He like I said, he put him on some med. He goes to see the heart doctor tomorrow. Okay. He does have a
Cardiologist.
a cardiologist appointment.
It's his second appointment, but yeah, he called me yesterday and said that his heart, was
Racing.
was not.
Oh yeah, that thing's like though some of them wear off and you have to find new ones or something.
But when I tried to reach him later and he wasn't responding, and so I texted my daughter-in-law, and she said, "We're done now." What are we done with? And they bought a truck. They were done signing papers.
For a
So he's
pickup.
fine.
pickup truck. Yeah, so he's doing fine. But just typical things. Yeah. Yeah. But that's one of those things. We just pray for that so much. Any other needs that you have, Vicki and her son and
Need prayers for Rick.
Yeah.
He's still got lots of health problems.
Yeah.
Lots of arthritis now.
Yeah.
And,
did he get his new shoes with his new insurance?
he's going to get them
Oh, okay.
soon.
They got to be fitted though, because he's got an unusual foot issue. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I have a foot issue.
They didn't.
They weren't real picturesque in how they took care of it, did they? So he's got to have an unusual shaped shoe to go on
One
that.
foot wider than the other.
1 foot, yeah.
They didn't.
Yep. They took care of the issue, but left as much as they could. But it makes it for an ill-formed, not matching pair. So, but again, the fact that he can do that, Mike.
I got so many things wrong with me. Y'all are tired of hearing about them, but we got a letter in the mail. No, we got a call from my heart doctor's nurse, and said your EKG didn't look good. First time it's never looked good, and he's gonna put you on.
He's got AFib and he's skipping a beat, so they put him on an additional blood thinner, Eliquis.
Wow.
So I went to the internet to look. It was $530, and I'm going.
For 60 pills. Not just 30,
Golly.
get 60.
I know.
But HEB filled it for 131.
Wow.
What a break, huh?
Wonderful. Well, yeah. Insurance ought to be able to do that.
20.
Well, it's under 30 because they went to HEB. You go to Walmart, they went to HEB.
You take the same thing.
No, either. It's a male.
Oh, it's a male pharmacy. Okay. Well, he went to
It's out in
HEB.
the ocean in a container
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah. Eliquis.
It's also
Is it Eliquis?
RX, 180 pills for $120.
I'm getting 60 for it.
Is it Eliquis?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Maybe.
Blood thinner, can't you tell? I've
Yeah.
looked it up.
I know that there are some people, they'll have to monitor because some people it doesn't work well for some people. And it's a little too severe or something. So I know that they're going to
They
peek him.
sent him to try it.
Yeah, to try it and see what happens. Yeah.
It works.
So be safe. Yeah, that's great. Like I say, I know some people who've tried that it really didn't, and it was a little bit precarious. But if it works, it works, and that's wonderful.
If I
Yeah.
start growing hair, we know it's
I don't think that's going to be the issue, Mike. Yeah, that's right. You have to start going to a barber if you get some more hair. Okay, I am going to get to the Bible study whether you like it or not. So we've mentioned some of the concerns that we're very mindful of, and I would invite us to just let me offer a prayer in our behalf for these and perhaps other needs that we probably would like to be able to share, but that's just not maybe comfortable in where we are right now. But we do remember each of you and our families and our extended family. I could mention Marion White. I could mention Vic Medina. There's just so many that we are concerned about and pray that God will be with them in those special times. Oh God, we thank you that we have a family large enough to be loved and to feel connected to and to be responsive through our prayers and through our thoughts, connecting with heaven's resources that bring healing and hope and peace in each of these situations. God, we lift them all before you and trust your care and your guidance and your presence in each of these circumstances. And however it is that our prayers are mindfully helpful and contributive to their situation in positive ways, even though we don't understand, we are delighted to be obedient to offer these prayers and offer these thoughts and to be very much invested in what you're up to in each of these circumstances and lives. Bless richly all that we've mentioned and maybe some that we've forgotten that we should, but you know who they are and you cover every one of these issues even when we can't put words around it because the thoughts of our hearts and the wishes and the intentions of our hopes for those that we love is very, very much interpreted and understood by you. So God, thank you for being who you are and remembering and bathing in love and grace and peace those who are very hurting and very frightened at this moment. Watch over and protect them. We give them to you in the name of the living Christ. Amen. All right, we are in chapter 23 of Genesis. It is a we're doing the whole chapter. It is a very secular chapter. God is mentioned once, but it's only kind of a phrase that I remember Madeline Murray O'Hare, if you don't remember who she was, and Texas Laura, the atheist, it was always tickling to me. I love listening to her because somewhere in the midst of her ranting and raving against all these religious people and what they're trying to do, then she'd cry, "God help us!" And I'm thinking, are you really praying? What just went on there? But she just burst out with that, "God help us!" Well, that's almost the expression that the one time God is mentioned in this chapter, that seems to be seems to have that same kind of quality. It's just a convenient expression that maybe has a double entendre. For the Jews who remembered this story and who recorded it, it meant one thing about Abraham, but to the pagan people who were affirming Abraham, it probably meant something much more casual and much more urbane than how it comes across to us with our religious sensitivities. I've shared with you before that the best that we have that is enjoyable, it is not important to understanding Scripture. It's one of those neat kinds of insights that provides an appreciation of why, even in English that translates the Hebrew, it is quite apparent that very different hands are at work. And there are some very specific signals that lets us know that. I've shared with you before that the Southern tradition, the J tradition, the Judean tradition, always calls God by His name that was revealed to Moses at the burning bush. Even though the stories that it tells anticipates and precedes Moses, telling the story, they just take the name revealed at the burning bush and insert it back into the stories. They're very much anthropomorphized. They're very primitive stories. They're very dynamic, very readable, very adventurous. That's the J tradition. The E tradition, the Elohist tradition, or from Ephraim, the northern kingdom, is much more sophisticated philosophically and theologically. In the southern tradition, the J tradition, God has conversation. One of the most apparent places where you can really appreciate it in English is to read chapter 1 of Genesis and then read chapter 2. In chapter 1, it is God that speaks and things happen. In chapter 2, it's Yahweh, it's Jehovah, the J tradition, that gets down there and He forms man with His hands like a child playing with a bunch of clay, and then He reaches over and puts His mouth to his lips that He's formed there, and He breathes into him the breath of life. Whenever He is making things to happen, He creates, He knows that man is really alone. He doesn't have a woman to yell at him all the time, and so He starts creating these animals, and He brings them to man, and He says, "What are you going to call this one?" And the man looks at it and says, "Well, it looks like a giraffe." He says, "Okay, it's a giraffe." And then he brings another. "What's that?" "That's a hippopotamus." "Okay, that's a hippopotamus." And after He made all these animals for man, even the cows, and probably had one little pet dog and a bunch of cats, named them all, but still He was so lonely, unlike my wife and her and our dog. But anyway, finally He causes a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and then He takes a rib from his rib cage and He forms into a helpmeet from him, somebody taken from his side, and He makes him a wife, and He makes from Ish he makes Isha, and so it's just the J tradition is just vivid, and Jehovah goes walking through the garden in late afternoon because noonday heat's a little too hot for Him, and He's crying out, "Adam, Eve, where are you?" And you think, you don't know where they are? What's wrong with you? Even Superman can figure out where they are. And of course Adam finally steps out and says, "We're right here," and he notices that they've got aprons on, and he said, "What have you done to yourself?" "Well, we knew that we were naked, and we didn't want you to see." "Who told you you were naked?" And so it's a very dynamic storytelling of the Southern tradition. The Northern tradition is much more sophisticated. God doesn't communicate in person. He communicates through dreams. He causes things to happen like a ancient monarch by speaking, and his emissaries or his angels carries it out and makes it happen. Never calls God by his name. It's always Elohim, which is in the Hebrew plural, but in context with a singular verb, we know we're talking about the God of Israel. And then you have the priestly tradition, which is tonight's source material. The priestly tradition is different than the others because it's kind of like the nerd engineer. The priestly tradition is always concerned about geography and always concerned about who was kin to whom. The begettings that go on that just drive you nuts is part of the priestly tradition because that was their job and their assignment. They're very concerned about where things happen and to put things in historical context. And they also generally call God by God because it's, again, a later tradition. After Moses, the priestly tribe developed much later and took on a very special function in ancient Israel's religion. And so tonight's story is a priestly story that is concerned about things. And right off the bat, one of the interesting little things about a priestly tradition, because they're always worried about those little details, is that we find out the age of a woman, the only woman in all of the Old Testament whose age we know anything about. This is the only time that a woman's age is revealed, much to her embarrassment, in spite of the fact that Sarah herself at one time said, I'm 90 years of age and I still haven't had a kid, you know. And of course God said, we'll take care of that. And he did, and she doesn't know what to do with herself. So chapter 23, beginning at verse 1, Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, another word for Kiriath Arba. Kiriath Arba means city of four, four square or something, and the commentaries that I read said that probably the Ezekiel and Revelation reference to the city four square really has its root in this very earliest tradition of God giving or planting his seed or planting his dreams in a particular territory, in a particular community, a city of four square or four communities. We don't know for sure what it is, but that's, if you were to translate Kiriath Arba, it means a city of four, but it's also later in the Jewish tradition, and the storytelling becomes known as Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Again, a very, very Near Eastern sort of thing. In fact, one of their expectations at the death of anybody was there was going to be wailing going on. And we can rest assured that Abraham really was saddened and grieved Sarah's death, even though his function and the way he deals with this is quite professional and quite collected intellectually. One of the things that is one of the characteristics of grief in its earliest stages is that there's a sense of mindless chaos and confusion and inability to think orderly, or to even that just life is chaotic, and part of one of the ways that you minister to somebody who is grieving is to go in and provide some order. Go make a meal for them. Stand around, let them talk. Invite them to talk about the death of the person and what memories that they have, and it begins to put order back in their life. And so Abraham is mourning. In fact, this was such a rite, even though the Jews did not treat death as a sacred kind of experience as many of the ancient cultures did. When you died, you're dead. And even though they wanted to put the body away from them and be respectful about that, they wanted to get them out of their sight. Even to this day, whether you're a Reformed Jew or Orthodox Jew, you're buried in 24 hours. It's just they just do not dwell, and they do not have the body in their midst as a reminder. They give it immediately back to the earth. One of the amazing things of pastoring a church in Kentucky was how elongated was the grieving process. How that when I was pastoring Buffalo Lick Baptist Church, some of the old families that had a death, of a husband or a grandparent or whatever else, they had what do they call it? It was I guess a wake. They had the body in the house, and they had somebody sitting with it around the clock for like 2 or 3 days before it'd be taken to the funeral home, and then you go on with the regular kinds of funeral experiences that we have in South Texas, but in Kentucky, huh?
We did that in Arkansas.
In Arkansas, yeah. The body comes home, and if they were in the hospital, they come home, and the casket is in the home, and people come by the home, and that deceased person is there, part of the ambience of why you're grieving and what you're doing. And it was really rather stunning and disconcerting to me as a Texan to have to deal with that, and I appreciate that that's one of the ways they grieve, and it's very appropriate. But it was not something that I was regularly used to and comfortable with. In antiquity, mourning was such an important part of the grieving process that even in Jesus' day, you had women who actually hired out to be professional mourners. They had particularly ugly voices that were unattractive and were hard to listen to, and they utilized that which we would consider to be an irritating, nerve-wracking kind of voice to hear as a good means of financial gain, because their voices being raised and crying, even though there was not any personal connection with it, they could mourn aloud and cry in such a way that it you couldn't pass within a block of that house and know that there wasn't a death down the street. And it was a very specific kind of thing that was hired on, 2 or 3 or 4 women sometimes, and they would have, even if you were a wealthy person, you'd have flutes or other kinds of musical instruments that would be part of that period of saying goodbye to them and going through the grief process. So Abraham is before her, mourning for Sarah and weeping for her. And verse 3, Abraham rose up from before his dead and said to the Hittites. And Hittites is a race of people that really come from over sort of further east of Canaan, and we know them. There was Hittite kings over in current day Iraq, Iran, and areas like that, but some of them evidently migrated over into Canaan, and they become known as Hittites. Or in the J tradition, this is the priestly tradition, it's the latest one, and but in the Judean tradition, I think they're called Amalekites, and in the northern tradition, they're generally referred to as Amorites. So it's the same people. They had commingled with the Canaanite culture, and but here that they're referred to as the Hittites that are occupying that land where Abraham, in the Beersheba area, where he and Sarah have been living. And Abraham goes up from before the dead, his wife, to the Hittites, and he says to them, I am a stranger and a sojourner among you. Now this is probably taking place at the gate of the community. That's going to be introduced like over in verse 10, I think it is. But this is, he goes basically to the city council. He goes to the gathering of the elders of the community. And he says, I'm a stranger, sojourner. I don't own land. I don't belong here. I'm just passing through. But give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. I've got to get her body out of my sight. Give me a place where I can place her. I don't have any place else to go. I'm a sojourner. The Hittites answered Abraham, Hear us, my Lord. You are a mighty prince among us. And I don't know if you have another translation. Does anybody have a different translation? A mighty prince? It says a mighty prince in yours. Gary, is yours the same? This is verse 6. First phrase. Mighty prince. Okay. That translates a Greek, Hebrew phrase of the a prince of God, or the not anointed of God, because that'd be a Messiah, but someone who is elected by God. It's a general description of somebody whose presence obviously was, caused you to really step back and say, there's some prominence here, there's some weight to this man's personality. And they're affirming him, you mighty prince among us. Says, bury your dead in the choicest of our sepulchres. None of us will withhold from you his sepulchre or hinder you from buying your dead. Burying your dead, buying your dead. Same thing. The title of the nice message is Buying Your Funeral Plot or Your Grave Plot. Anyway, Abraham very wisely, in a typical Mideastern fashion, he's got an agenda, but he's kind of testing the waters to see how responsive they're going to be to his desire to have a burial place for Sarah. So he's just been sort of uncommitted, but wanting something in very general forms. They come back with a very, again, typical, over exaggerated, but Mideastern kind of way. Hey, you take the best we got, okay? They don't mean it, but they're expected to say that. So you take the best that we've got, the choicest. None of us will hold it from you. So Abraham stands up and he says, and he bows to the Hittites, the people of the land. He says to them, okay, if you're willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, listen to me and entreat for me Ephron, the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as a possession for a burying place. So Abraham says, okay, I know where I want to bury my wife. Now that you're saying I can have any place, I want Ephron's cave at the end of his land. That's what I'm after. You know, tell Ephron about that. Well, it turns out, as you're fixing to hear, Ephron was sitting there listening to this. So now Ephron was sitting among the Hittites, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites of all who went in at the gate of his city. That's the reference to about where all this is happening. No, my Lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the presence of the sons of my people, I give it to you. Bury your dead. Again, smooth car salesman. We can only guess, and candidly, family, there are archival records of ancient buying and selling of land, and this kind of drama, this kind of language, fits very well with archaeological discoveries. This is the way they talk. This is the way they did business. They didn't have a courthouse. They didn't have documents you signed. It was all done in the presence of other people with a kind of language that's over the top, is not terribly honest, and when you get down to it, and we're fixing to see that here in just a moment, but he says, you know, Ephron comes up and says, hey, you can have the cave, and you can have that field. And we can only guess that in the Hittite culture, as within the Jewish culture, if you own the field, it was incumbent upon you that you remember your civic responsibilities to provide for those who did not have fields and did not have as much as you did. And you'll remember the law of God talking about how that when you were to glean your harvest from your field, you were not to glean the edges of your field. You were to leave that for the poor who were to come by, and they could take what they needed from the edges, the boundaries of your field. And that seems to have been part of this. And Ephron's really wanting to get tired of this field because he's really sick and tired of trying to make sure that he takes care of everybody else. And so it may have become a burden to him. That's a guess on our part and the scholarship's part. But he wants that field to be done with too, and not just the cave. So then Abraham, verse 12, bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, but if you will hear me, I will give the price of the field. Now, Ephron said, I'm going to give it to you. Abraham comes back and says, we both know that's lying. You name your price. I will buy it, and I will buy the field. Please accept from me what you need as an offering, because I need a place to bury my wife, my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, and here comes his selling price, okay? Done not very directly, but Abraham heard the price when he's telling it that. He says, verse 15, my Lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver, what is that between you and me? Now, that is an overpriced field. One of the kings that comes in buys the whole city of Damascus for like 1,000 shekels. houses and everything. I don't know how big this field was, but 400 shekels is really gouging. It is unmistakable that this is, I mean, he's not only doubling the price. I was reminded when I was reading this that my grandmother, my daddy's mother, my grandmother Bill, worked at Kelly Field after my grandfather, her husband, was gored to death by a bull in the early 40s. She was working at Kelly Field all during World War II, and she was an old ranch woman, and so she would go buy a ranch, 900 acres, whatever it was, she'd buy it. She'd look all around Central Texas, she'd buy a ranch. And the next day she'd put it back on the market at twice the price. And she'd worked the land for 4, 5, 10 years until somebody came along and offered her asking price. And then she'd turn around and buy another ranch and double the price, put it right back on the market. And it may sit on the market for another 10 or 15 years. In my teenage years, I think we went through 4 ranches. And I didn't realize that's what she was doing, but she was a good business lady, took care of herself. But all the time that, that it was waiting for somebody to buy it, she worked it. She raised goats and cattle and everything else. I mean, she loved being a ranch woman. That's what she and her husband did, and it just never got out of her bed. So anyway, Ephron is saying, why are we arguing over this? I mean, the land's only worth 400 shekels. Of course, everybody's sitting around and said, boy, if he pays you that, you found a sucker. I want to sell him the next piece of land. Anyway, Abraham agreed with Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver which he had named in the hearing of the Hittites. 400 shekels of silver, according to the weights current among the merchants. And we have no idea what that computes to in local dollars. All we know is, given some other circumstances in later Old Testament literature, that was an inflated price of magnitude. And I don't know if it was a 50 shekel land he got 400 shekels for, but it was not worth what he paid for it. Abraham didn't negotiate. He went ahead and invested it, and he bought a place. In fact, by the time that Genesis is finished, Jacob's going to be buried there. Rebekah, Leah's going to be buried there. Isaac is going to be buried there. Abraham is going to be buried there. Machpelah was a grave for the patriarchs and the matriarchs of the earliest generation of the Hebrew people. And so it was a pretty good investment, even though it was outside the formal province of the land of Israel. South of it, in the Negev, it became a place where their fathers were buried. In fact, scholars believe that there is a Muslim mosque that is actually built on the site of of this grave, of this cave. Because Abraham is one of the fathers of the Muslim religion too. And it was important for Christians, and as well as important for the Jews. So it was a very major spot. We are only guessing that that's where it was, just like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We think that might be the place that Jesus actually was buried in Joseph of Arimathea's tomb, but we don't know that for sure. It could have been some other places. Jerusalem was filled with lots of tombs where burials took place, but that's what happened. And then verses 17 to the end of the chapter, this is where we'll end, is basically a kind of a legal description, a kind of in real estate, it is sort of the the scaled out description of the property. It's where it's located and how wide it is and how deep it is, what kind of utilities it has on it. The field of Ephron and Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, the field with the cave which was in it, and all the trees that were in the field throughout its whole area, was made over to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the Hittites before all who went in at the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, east of Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. The field and the cave that is in it were made over to Abraham as a possession for a burying place by the Hittites. And as I said before, everything's said and done, that's going to be Abraham's burial place too. Again, a very kind of secular chapter that deals with buying a burial plot. It's all it's dealing with. And we don't know for sure Scholars have argued about why is this story in there? What kind of theological consequence can it have? And they love discussing that. The one thing that even though there doesn't seem to be any theological trajectory or reason for this particular story to be recorded, I would observe that for Jews, where death was not a sacred moment in the life of its people, it was something that happened, and everybody, in the words of the Green Mile, the Tom Hanks and whatever his figure was at the end of the thing when he's an old man, talks about we owe this life our death. I thought it was a very religious statement that he made, but for the Jews, that's basically what it was. You're going to die. And before the time when this began to be written down, there was no belief among Jews that there was any eternal life that was of any consequence. A little bit later in the Jewish theology, when you died, you became a shadow. You couldn't talk. You couldn't initiate anything. You were just like a shadow. You had been in existence, but you no longer were there to be hugged or to have conversation with. Increasingly, as the Jews moved towards the Christian century, being infected by the Persian and Babylonian religions, they began to, some of the Jews, not the Pharisees, but the Sadducees began to develop a theology that there was an afterlife. Something happened when we died, that we were to be resurrected, that we had viability. And that's an ongoing sort of progressive evolution in terms of how the Jews thought about that. But the important consequence for us as we think about this, and this is true throughout all the stories of the Old Testament, is the reason why you buried someone was to put them out of your sight, to remove them from being part of what made life viable to you. It was almost as if it was God's way of saying, I want you to do this because I don't want you to lose sight of me. I want you to know that your next step and your next decision is based upon keeping your vision on me and my commandments and what I want you to do. And so one of the ways that concretely and maybe symbolically they reminded themselves that God alone was the one who didn't change and who would not disappear from them. By burying them very quickly, they removed any possibility that they would become fixated or somewhat enamored or invested in that dead person in a way that kept them from really accepting God's sort of providence and leadership in their life as He continued to work with them. So it's an interesting chapter. Next week we're going to marry somebody. So Abraham's still old. We're fixing to lose him, but he's got a son that needs to find a wife. And so that's going to be part of the story that we're going to have next week. And my wife won't be here, so I'll get to tell the kind of stories I want to tell and not have to worry about anything, being critiqued or something. No, it probably won't ever get recorded, so we'll do that. It will get recorded. Thank you so much. I love having this time with you, and appreciate you making the time to do this. And I'll close with prayer. And this Sunday is Communion Sunday, and we'll share the Lord's Supper. And Peter's already got the music picked out, and Ray's going to be there playing, and I don't know if he's going to be doing a special or whatever, but it's going to be a blessed time for us. And it'll be our last chance to beat up Pat, give her some bruises to remember. So the one pain we give her will be replaced by the pain of learning how to walk without pain. So that's going to be something special, Pat. We're just...
First time I can get out of that house.
I know you will. I know you will. I just love that. I love that. It can't be too long. Got to get you here. Yes.
I remembered one person, please. A friend of mine, Rosie, lost her sister today.
Oh,
So we can remember
wow.
Rosie and her family.
Rosie and her family lost a sister. Unexpected.
It was expected, but
Okay, but not
for
the
very
timing.
long.
Yeah.
It was pretty quick.
Wow. That is sad. That is sad. Thank you, Gwen. God, thank you so much that in the midst of life that is filled with joy and promise and hope and delight for us, it doesn't chase us away from looking at the dark places where people are hurting and we can hurt with them, and that doesn't compromise the joy that we experience when we are together in your name. That you infect us with your presence and you lead us and you promise to be with us at every step that we take. So God, I dismiss the steps of these brothers and sisters of mine in the way that they leave this place in this moment. Guide and use them and protect them to bring honor to you in every way that they live out their lives and develop their relationships. For I give them all into your keeping in the name of Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you so much. Punch the button and let's kill the
Live feed.
the live feed.